Odyssey is one of the world's most bizarre roller coasters. This is a Vekoma suspended looping coaster, or SLC, but it is not the standard layout. It is far from it. This is a supersized version with a custom layout. That is notable in itself, but this coaster's lore goes so much deeper. The ride was originally designed to be the tallest coaster in all of Europe. Even further, this is the most expensive coaster in the history of the United Kingdom. The restraints were changed at one point due to Nipple-Burn, and the ride is quite literally powered by poo. There's a lot to talk about with Odyssey, but is it actually good? Find out in this review. Fantasy Island opened in 1995. In 1998, they revealed an ambitious expansion plan. This included a large new roller coaster in Millennium, a large hotel, and an indoor water park. Millennium opened in 1999 as the park's first major thrill ride. This was a Vekoma sit-down looping coaster. It featured 3 inversions and it circled the entire park. The ride was very well received, and it's still one of the park's signature attractions to this day. But plans for the on-site hotel and indoor water park were scrapped. Instead, the park decided to focus on a second thrill coaster because of Millennium's positive reception. So the park went back to Vekoma, eyeing their suspended looping coaster model, or SLC. Usually these rides feature a compact standard layout. These rides usually stand 109 feet or 33 meters tall and feature 5 inversions. One such example within the UK is Infusion at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. But Fantasy Island had much grander aspirations. They shared plans originally for a 265-foot or 81-meter tall SLC. This would have immediately become the tallest coaster in all of Europe, and would still hold the record for the UK's tallest coaster to this day. The ride also would have featured a record-breaking 200-foot or 61-meter tall vertical loop. Due to its sheer size, the ride would have crossed over the nearby Sea Lane, the road that runs alongside the park. Then the ride would have featured 4-across seating, as opposed to the standard 2-across trains used in all other SLCs. However, the ride was rejected by local residents. The planning committee restricted the park to a max height of 180 feet, or 55 meters. It is crazy to think that's the only reason we do not have an SLC taller than every other roller coaster in Europe today except for Red Force. The park continued to work with Vekoma and developed a scaled-back version of the ride, but it was still colossal. The coaster would stand 167 feet, or 51 meters tall, making it the tallest inverted coaster in all of Europe, and the second tallest full-circuit invert in the entire world. The ride opened in 2002 as Jubilee Odyssey, named in honor of Queen Elizabeth II's Golden Jubilee. About a decade later, the ride dropped the Jubilee part and has gone by just Odyssey ever since. One of the most astonishing things about this coaster is that it costs £28 million or $42 million US, and that was back in 2002. Even without adjusting for inflation, that still holds the record as the most expensive roller coaster ever constructed in the UK. That translates to approximately £57 million or $85 million US today, which is over 3 times the price Thorpe Park paid for Hyperia. This is a big ride, don't get me wrong, but I am still stunned it cost as much as it did. The coaster has a fine duration of 2,924 feet or 891 meters, but that's not astronomically long by any means. If the scaled-back version cost this much, I am morbidly curious what the hyper version would have cost. If anyone knows why this coaster specifically cost as much as it did, I would love to know more down in the comments. It just doesn't make sense to me. I know the original SLCs were desirable to parks because they are more budget-friendly than a B&M invert, but there is nothing budget-friendly with Odyssey. Around the same time, Nitro at Six Flags Great Adventure was built for roughly half the price. That coaster is roughly twice as long and 60 feet taller. If you want to look at inverts specifically, Alpengeist at Busch Gardens Williamsburg was built for half the price. That has a taller and longer invert, built on more challenging terrain. Needless to say, my jaw dropped when I heard how much Odyssey cost. It seems like the park was ripped off, especially given the overall ride quality and the myriad of issues this coaster had in its first few years. For one, the ride was valley prone. Elements were simply too high, and the train lost too much speed to navigate them. This was such an issue that multiple elements, most notably the turnaround and later inversions, were lowered before the 2003 season. We've seen some coasters reprofile an element or two throughout the years, but it's quite the feat to have to change roughly half the elements on an already constructed ride just 1 year after opening. Further exacerbating the issue was wind. 25 to 30 mile/hour winds could be enough to shut this coaster down, and given how Ingold Mills is located right next to the coast, those winds happen quite frequently. The restraints have also had issues. The original restraints in 2002 rubbed people the wrong way, as they quite literally caused multiple women to complain about nipple burn. Now, I have heard many complaints about Vekoma SLCs through the years, but not once have I heard about this issue. I could not find a clear photo of Odyssey's trains back in 2002, but the restraints did not appear to be the standard harness in other SLCs. As a result, the park spent £60,000 to replace the harnesses before the 2003 season. This was not the end of the restraint issues though. In 2005, one of the restraint connectors snapped. So Vekoma upgraded the harnesses with toughened steel. At the same time, they took the opportunity to reduce play in the wheel assemblies to reduce shuffling of the train. This supposedly gave the ride a more comfortable experience. For many years, the ride had red track and gray supports. This contrasted nicely with the adjacent Millennium, which had yellow track and red supports. But in 2016, Odyssey was given yellow track, which blended in with Millennium, especially because the two rides closely interact with each other at points. Fortunately, the latter was given a unique paint scheme once again for the 2018 season, with pink track and green supports. Now the two rides once again stand out from each other. It looks a lot better. Odyssey is not themed, but it is a really striking coaster. Because of how flat the area is, it can be seen for miles as you approach the park. It looks unnatural to see a Vekoma invert this large, and it has a dominating presence. That's especially true if you park in Fantasy Island's main lot, because the coaster runs alongside it. One major downside from an aesthetic perspective is that this park placed their junkyard directly underneath Odyssey. I get this park is landlocked, and this was their best option, but it is sort of awkward when you look down during your ride and notice trash or old ride parts lying around. It does not look good. Most parks place this in a backstage area outside guest view. The ride station is also rather cheap. It just looks like a black shipping container. On the side of it, you have a large sign bearing the ride's name. Then you have some extra signs boasting this ride's claim to fame as the world's tallest and fastest SLC. The queue line is then wedged between the station and indoor area. This is not a pleasant waiting area though. You have 4 long switchbacks and nothing to see. And if you visit on a busy day, you may be waiting a while. Whereas the original iteration of this layout would have had 3 trains, Odyssey today operates with just 1. I still cannot believe, for as expensive as this ride was, it only has 1 train. And that train holds just 20 riders, as you have 10 rows of 2. Add in a nearly 2.5 to 3 minute cycle time, and a few minutes to load and unload, this ride typically accommodates close to 240 riders per hour. That is not good for a signature coaster. My lone visit was on a summer Saturday, and for much of the afternoon, this coaster had a 45 to 60 minute wait. This was with roughly 3/4 of the queue line filled. Most people had wristbands, but you can also pay per ride. Each ride on Odyssey costs £6 as of 2024. Now again, I visited one of the busier days. I imagine the waits are considerably less if you avoid a summer weekend. Still, during the last hour of operation, the ride was no more than a 2 to 3 train wait. So if you don't beat the crowds here in the morning, you may want to head here later in the day. One caveat with that though, ride it as soon as possible if heavy winds are in the forecast. While the park has made some modifications to make the ride more resistant to wind, it is still one of the more sensitive rides out there. To be frank, I was worried this ride would not even be open for my visit. Ground winds were hovering in the 15 to 20 mile per hour range for much of the day, and gusts were frequently around the 30 to 35 mile per hour mark, and again that was at ground level. But to my amazement, this coaster operated all day long. I would still recommend visiting on a day with calmer winds if you have flexibility to maximize your odds of getting on this coaster, because I know wind closures can still happen with this ride. While on that topic, this ride also breaks wind. You see, this coaster is quite literally powered by poo. The lift hill and brakes run on a 4 million pound, dung-powered generator. When I heard that, I expected this ride to smell like a dirty diaper, but fortunately, you can't smell that, or any of the trash underneath the ride for that matter. When you reach the end of the queue, just enough people are admitted into the station to fill the next train. Seating is typically front to back, but if you ask the staff members nicely, they will usually honor row requests and let you wait an extra cycle if needed. I thought this was a front row coaster. I thought the forces felt fairly similar throughout the train, but the front really let you feel the speed. You also get that unobstructed view that really shines on an invert, and it was the smoothest row on the ride. That is important to note because this ride can be pretty rough. It is easy to get headbanging on any directional change. I didn't get any hard slams, but my head would shake side to side against the restraint. It's easier to anticipate this in the front row. Now let's talk about those restraints. They are not the usual SLC restraints. These are over-the-shoulder harnesses that feel more like the ones on intimate inverted coasters in terms of their profiling. But the padding is much squishier and spongier. My first ride was rather uncomfortable, but I found a way to make the experience far more tolerable. This is a ride where you actually want to be stapled. If the restraint is jammed against you, the harness will be flush with your ears. That will allow you to jam your head against one side of the restraint. Since the headbangs are not too violent, you should be able to apply enough pressure to keep your head steady against the restraint for the whole ride to minimize headbanging. If you are not stapled, the restraint may be too far forward for this strategy to work. You may not have enough surface area for this and your head may slip and bash around. The coaster begins with a very slow lift hill. It takes nearly 1 minute to reach the top. The chain moves at the same gradual pace as the other SLCs, but this ride is just way taller. I don't mind though because you get some nice views. You can look over much of the park to your left. Towards the top, you can see the beach and ocean in front of you. The ride begins with a 141 foot or 43 meter tall drop that twists slightly to the right. This drop is significantly better than your standard SLC. Not only is it taller, but it is way steeper. It builds up a ton of speed, and if you're in the back row, you don't get traditional airtime, but you will get a falling sensation for much of the plunge. You do need to watch your head in the initial twist though in the back as you are pulled over the drop. This leads directly into the 124 foot or 38 meter tall vertical loop. This is huge. This held the record for Europe's tallest vertical loop all the way until 2018. It still holds the record in the United Kingdom though. And this is my favorite inversion on the ride by far. It is the smoothest of the 5 inversions, and it has nice force to it. You get really good G's up front as you are pushed into it. You lose quite a bit of speed over the top, but the back gets solid G's as the train completes the second half of it. Immediately afterwards, you have a large cobra roll. It is not nearly as forceful as it may appear though. You only get some light Gs on the entry and exit. Then the flips take place high in the air. This bleeds off a lot of speed, so they don't have the same whip as a cobra roll in the old school B&M loopers. You can get some headbanging though, so brace yourself here. Odyssey then has a big turnaround. This is one spot where the ride is valleyed multiple times, so needless to say, the element feels fairly sluggish at the top. As a result, this is another element that is light in the positive Gs. It really doesn't do much. To make matters worse, it's the most prominent spot for headbanging on the entire ride. This element really jostles the train. Next is the Sidewinder. The entry offers what feels like the strongest positive Gs in the ride if you're in the front. You are slammed into your seat back. They are milder in the back, but still solid. The flip at the apex is another spot that can cause headbanging, but it also has some okay whip coming out of it if you're in the rear rows. This leads into a high twist that is another rough moment. Expect to get some headbanging if you're not bracing yourself. It may have some Gs, but I was too focused on self-preservation. Next is a high bunny hill. It is too gradual to offer any airtime, but it is smooth at least. The coaster then finishes with a corkscrew. It is decently whippy, making it the best inversion in the ride for that particular force. It is another spot that can cause headbanging without bracing though. You then come to a smooth stop on the first set of dung-powered brakes, but you still have another 1 minute of ride time. You then slowly pass through another brake run that probably could be reprogrammed to support 2 trains if they really wanted to, stopping another time or 2. Then you return back to the station, ending the experience. I already touched on the smoothness, but what about the pacing? I love this ride's speed in the valleys, but it bleeds off a lot of speed on the inversions and turns, so the coaster has an ebb and flow to it. It feels like every element was 10 to 20 feet too tall. Shorter elements not only would have helped the pacing, but it also would have helped the ride's forces, and it also would have helped with this coaster's valleying issues. Maybe it could then operate in the higher winds this park often sees. So what would I rate the Odyssey? I would give this coaster a 3 out of 10. It has impressive stats and speed, and 3 of the inversions are good, particularly that vertical loop and Sidewinder. But the ride unfortunately is on the rougher side, and this can spoil the experience. If you don't brace yourself, you can get a lot of headbanging. You can jam your head to one side to make the experience more tolerable, but I personally take issue with a coaster when I have to expend that much effort to mitigate roughness. You're focusing more on your head position rather than the fun elements the ride has. This is why I think ultimately this is a below average invert. I would take all the B&M inverts over this coaster easily, but I would take Odyssey over most Vekoma SLCs because it is far more unique and thrilling, even if it does beat you up still. I am hopeful that Odyssey could get a major refurbishment in the future to allow it to ride to its fullest potential. The most crucial change in my opinion would be new restraints. Several SLCs have had the old over-the-shoulder restraints replaced with vest harnesses. This makes a world of a difference. These restraints eliminate all headbanging, fixing most of the comfort issues. If Odyssey got these trains, it likely would become a good coaster immediately, and the rating would likely jump 3 to 4 points for me. And if they did that, maybe they could add a second train while they're at it to increase this coaster's throughput. It is definitely long enough to support multi-train operations. They also could retrack the coaster in a similar fashion as Maurice Piers did with Great Nor'easter. But this is a far more expensive change than upgrading the restraints, and I think the restraint change would be more impactful anyway. Although the park may be sensitive to adjusting the restraints given the issues they had with Nipple-Burn 2 decades ago, but I have not heard of anyone having that issue with Vekoma's vest harnesses, even on the rough SLCs that have gotten them. I still go back to this ride's price. I get that the park wanted an invert, and they had a good relationship with Vekoma, but I am stunned they paid as much as they did for a Vekoma SLC. At the rate they paid, they definitely could have afforded one from Ballinger and Mabillard, and that likely would have yielded a much better experience. Odyssey is still a landmark for the park though, and despite the roughness, it still seems to be popular with a large chunk of the park. I just would have preferred to see £28 million go to something better and smoother. So those are my thoughts on Odyssey at Fantasy Island. What are your thoughts on the world's tallest and fastest Vekoma SLC? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this review, I would appreciate it if you gave this video a like, and you consider subscribing, because there'll be a lot more roller coaster and amusement park videos here at Canopy Coaster. Thanks for watching.